Time to talk about the famous German assault guns, or as they call in German, Sturmgeschütze. Now this video is more about the branch and organization and not the individual vehicles. Thus the name assault artillery, because this is the translation of the original name, which was Sturmartillerie. Now the origin story of the assault artillery begins unsurprisingly in World War I. During the war, a common problem was that after a successful initial attack, the follow-up attack advanced too far for providing proper artillery support, or it took too long to move the guns forward. Furthermore, there was a lack of direct fire support. After all, most guns were quite unwieldy and the terrain usually quite deformed from artillery fire. Additionally, these guns were usually not well protected, even from small arms fire. There were several developments, but the first major call for Sturmartillerie as a mobile and armored infantry support gun was in 1935 in a memorandum from Erich von Manstein, back then when he was still a colonel. He proposed three main formations as the base for the army. First, an independent tank division with their own organic infantry and artillery units to support the tanks. Second, independent tank brigades that consisted only of tanks and that were under the authority of the army command, to allow for a localized concentration of force. Third, regular infantry units with organic assault gun units to support the infantry. Now the important part here is that the assault gun units should be an organic part of the infantry division. Why is this important? Well, organic divisional units are trained with the division and stay with the division all the time. This means that other division units are familiar with them. Thus all of them are trained to support each other in operations. Hence everyone involved knows the strengths and weaknesses of each unit. Additionally, you need to consider that back then most German divisions weren't even motorized. Thus a Sturmgeschütz was quite an oddity that was mostly known from propaganda. Hence a lot of soldiers attribute the qualities to these units that they couldn't fulfill, something that could be deadly in combat situations. Note that the proposed number of units per division was relatively small. Every division should have one battalion with 3 batteries each with 6 StuGs, thus only 18 StuGs in total. But numbers without context can be misleading, so let's take a look at a weapon system with a similar role and its numbers. This would be the light infantry support gun, and in a regular German infantry division of 1940 just 20 of these were present, thus the number of 18 StuGs actually isn't that low as it might appear at first glance. Around 2 years later, the first 5 prototypes were ready in winter 1937, after which the first series of 30 units was ordered. This series wasn't completely delivered until May 1940, hence the first time StuGs were used in significant numbers was during Operation Barbarossa. The original plan called for an assault gun battalion for each active division until fall 1939. Yet due to changes in the command structure, delays in specification, limits to the German arms industry and internal rivalries, this goal was never achieved. Even far from it, even in May 1940 only 2 batteries were operational, whereas around 180 would have been necessary to equip all active divisions in May 1940. At the start of Operation Barbarossa in June 1941 the situation had changed. Around 250 StuGs were ready. These were organized in 11 battalions and 5 independent batteries. During these combat operations it became obvious that the combat effectiveness of infantry units was increased by a large degree to the use of assault gun units, due to the high amount of training, firepower and mobility. It should be noted that the assault guns were part of the artillery branch, thus they were accustomed to supporting infantry units from the get-go, unlike tank units. Furthermore, the better optics and strong emphasis on artillery practice resulted in a higher hit chance. Yet one major problem was that the battalions were part of the overall army units and not organic units of the infantry divisions as Manstein originally had proposed. Thus the coordination between the infantry and the StuGs was limited. By the end of 1942, 27 StuG battalions were operational on the Eastern Front. Furthermore, the required range increased from 22 to 31 StuGs. Although on average only 12 were operational. This means around 320 StuGs were operational at this time. Although the assault guns were originally intended for infantry support, their role changed on the Eastern Front rather rapidly. Because the German anti-tank guns with 37 and 50 mm were simply not able to deal with the T-34 and KV-1. Although in summer 1942 The 75mm anti-tank gun was introduced. This gun was too heavy to have a tactical mobility. Since spring 1942 the StuGs were upgraded to the F version that used the long-barreled 75mm gun, which was capable of dealing with the Russian tanks. And unlike the dedicated tank destroyers like the Marder 1 and 2, it was better armored and had a far lower silhouette. Thus the StuG 3F was the best German anti-tank weapon at its introduction. As a result, many StuGs were used in the anti-tank role, but thus they were missing from the intended role, namely supporting infantry. This was the reason for the development of the Sturmhaubitze, literally meaning assault howitzer, which was equipped with a 105mm howitzer and thus had even more firepower. By the end of 1943 there were 39 assault gun battalions on the Eastern Front, with a total of 1006 StuGs. The average operational rate increased to 15 StuGs per battalion. Yet in 1943 the Wehrmacht was already mostly on the defensive, and the StuG became a mainstay of this defense. Once Adrian became inspector of the tank troops, he continuously tried to get the assault artillery integrated into the tank destroyer units, yet without success. Nevertheless, a quite large number of produced StuGs were transferred into tank divisions to compensate for the lack of regular tanks. This situation worsened after the failed 20th July assassination attempt against Hitler, after which Adrian became chief of staff. He limited the total amount of assault gun battalions to 45 and furthermore assigned a smaller portion of the produced StuGs to the assault artillery branch. Although the number of assault guns increased year by year and reached its peak in 1944, more and more numbers were assigned to other branches. Ultimately, in March 1945, the total number of assault gun battalions was 37, with a total number of 606 operational vehicles. Now some of you might wonder, what about the various other variants of German armored support vehicles with large guns that were similar to assault guns, like the Sturmpanzer Bison, the Sturmpanzer 38T Grille, and of course the Sturmtiger? Well, those were parallel developments by the German tank branch. Most of them were used with rather limited success. They usually used obsolete vehicle chassis and traded firepower for mobility and protection. Thus they had a rather unbalanced quality. The combat effectiveness was quite limited, and for the most part they were just a waste of already limited resources. To a certain degree, these parallel developments by the tank branch were motivated by the fact that the assault guns were part of the artillery branch, and thus to avoid any dependency on that branch. Now there's one question that military historians up to this day haven't answered yet. Namely, what is the difference between the FAG life and the StuG life? Well, first is the German accent, and second is organization. So here we go. Now the original assault battery from 1939 had the following organization: 1 battery headquarters, 3 platoons, a light armored armor column, a transport unit, and a maintenance squad. Each of the 3 platoons consisted of 1 observation half-track, 2 StuG free, and 2 armor half-tracks. Now this is a rather odd setup, because the headquarters unit actually is only equipped with an observation half-track, whereas armored headquarter units usually had a similar vehicle than their combat units. In total, the unit had 5 observation vehicles, 6 StuGs, and 6 armored armor carriers. Note that this was an intended organization that was probably never achieved due to the lack of proper half-tracks, which to a certain degree were replaced by trucks in the following layouts. Now the 1941 version was quite similar. A major change was the addition of a 7th StuG in the headquarters unit. Furthermore, for this unit I have some data on the men and equipment. In total there were 5 officers, 1 official, 37 NCOs, 83 enlisted men. For the equipment, 9 light machine guns, 17 trucks, 6 cars, 7 StuGs, and 3 light armored armor carriers. As you can see, the early batteries were quite small with only 2 StuGs each. This number increased throughout the war. So let's take a look at an organization of an assault gun battalion from November 1942. It consists of a headquarter unit and 3 assault gun batteries. Each assault gun battery consists of a headquarters unit, 3 platoons, and a transport unit. Each platoon had now 3 StuGs and each headquarter unit 1 StuG. Now if I add the multipliers, we get a total of 31 StuGs. Finally, let's take a look at the late war unit. One of the latest organizations was the Heeres Sturmartillerie Brigade. which means Army Assault Artillery Brigade from 1944. It consists of a brigade headquarters, 3 assault gun battalions, 1 support grenadier battery. Now this unit was just motorized infantry. Why the name battery? Because it was part of the artillery branch, and usually artillery units have the name battery instead of company. Each of the assault gun battalions consists of a headquarters unit, 1 assault gun battery, and a transport unit. Finally, assault gun batteries consist of 2 assault gun platoons, 1 assault howitzer platoon, an ammo column, and 1 maintenance column. Now if you think this is overly complicated, well, you might be right, or you might not be German enough. Anyway, each assault gun platoon consists of 4 StuGs, whereas each assault howitzer platoon consists of 4 assault howitzers. Now let's take a look at the whole unit. The headquarters units together consist of 9 vehicles, whereas the combat platoons of each battalion had a total of 12 vehicles. Hence together there were 30 assault guns and 15 assault howitzers in the brigade. To summarize, the original concept for the StuG was to be a direct fire support weapon for the infantry, especially in the attack against enemy defensive positions. The StuG combined mobility, firepower and protection, and additionally, since it was part of the artillery branch, its members were better trained in firing and also far more accustomed to support infantry units unlike regular tank units. To compensate for the lack of proper tank destroyers, the StuGs were often pressed in the tank destroyer role, for which it was ideally suited to its strong frontal armor and low silhouette, although this was not their initially intended role. Ultimately, assault guns units were also added organically to infantry divisions, but at this stage the German side was already on the defense. Thus the StuG was mainly used as a tank destroyer and not as an original role supporting infantry in offensive operations. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, share and subscribe. And see you next time.